it is the only lines that I can keep with at the moment is that place where, and I ended that reading last night. That reading happens to be the last two lines were, and he and I distinguish between chanting and letting the song lie in the thing itself. And I think that he's saying that we have got to a point, or that Shoshone chant does that thing, which is that the song lying in the thing itself is the only real, what is too easily called magic of song, but what really song is something that goes right through everything, and the literal, that attention, and when I think you'd agree that that's where it was autobiographically that it was attention that started, it was critical that we, and I find it still true that the specific, that you have something very specific that will cause your attention to be, and that then you get the results, which are these, the thing that the song does lie in the thing itself, and that's what they call. I mean, that's power. That's power. And that's what we, I guess, really. I think this last 122 hours is simply an evidence that quite a few men have caught on to the secret of power, and it's been not. It's been treated cheap a long time. Somehow, I don't know how even it got treated cheap, and one doesn't even know, except that one does know exactly how you have to live to have that come into at least language, so that it does do what you're talking about. That song, too. Anyhow, that guy.
Yeah. Well, after 1950, what you're talking about, the mind, say, the possession of the mind,
yeah,
the mind,
right.
that span through 1950. What happens then to that force of language? I was thinking of Alan's reading the other night, that is undeniable as a force. I was calling it popular or whatever, and it certainly gets reflected in those rapt attentions that he was able to hold. What happens to that? What does that kind of language mean then? Because it isn't the same thing you're talking about. It is sociological cataloging.
Yes, it is.
It is the returning to an audience of all of the things that they are such despair of. It seems to me. And shifting them so that there's a relief implicit in them when they hear them again, in a different way.
Right.
But all right, so much for the effects. What would you say is the validity of that? Because, it's not that I agree with you. You know that. But, I mean, I'm interested in exactly what might be your objections to it. Even if they're objections, I would not even want to put that word in your mouth at all.
Well, let me say the way it came in. By God, it came in onto me yesterday afternoon, and I said it. And I said it as a result of talking to Alan the day before. In a very careful walk down the street with John to get alone and talk about his reading. And gee, if I can only say this fast enough to say it, but I know exactly how I feel it. But it let you say yesterday, after saying that after all, really, to discriminate was what I was talking about. And I said that, and conceivably there is the pole of that is to exaggerate. And I was reminded of that poem which I wrote, which I've never looked at again, to Jack Rice, which has the title something exaggerate, or how properly to heap up, which is what exaggerate means. And that instead of that, as I said to Alan, I think he is using everything in the world. And it's like almost, it'll eat him up if he's not careful. Because he's gone, he now is using words to try to include everything in the world. And now I want to just say the last piece of it, if I can. I read a poem on Tuesday here, which has that crazy name repeated, Enyalion. And Dirt come to me, and I won't say, hell, sure, his wife and him were making love, and as she was stroking his back, he found she was saying Enyalion, Enyalion, Enyalion. And he says to me, will you tell me who that Enyalion is? And I says, yes. I said, I said that when I introduced it. I discovered this as and it was a deliverance for me, that's the only apparent earliest Indo-European real name for the guy who we know later as Mars in Latin and Ares in Greek. But I didn't say this to Durden. I said, why, it's the god of war. And he turned his back in disgust and said, I wish I hadn't asked you.
I'll just stand back here and play for a while.
Yeah.